I'll bring Julia Black in. She was with us earlier today,
Hello
and she
again.
is our lights on. Oh, there you are. I was looking for you to
Yeah, yeah.
spotlight you. There you go. And
Hiya. Having
and
me back.
yeah, yeah, and I kind of feel like I can just if there's anything specific you want to share, but uh, I think what I really enjoyed is you did such a good talk about what lights off looks like and what lights on looks like, and perhaps you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. And actually, as I was listening to Graham and you and Alison talk there as well, I feel that this as a metric, lights on or lights off, could be really valuable to gather data that kind of builds the case, I guess, for home ed, or even, for parents who've got children in school and want to affect changes there. Because when we start to look at what being lights off means, so my metric lights on, lights off, and I have this tool that's the lights on spectrum. It really means the sort of the state of being, and lights off, obviously, means that we are frustrated, angry, despondent, feeling apathy. So all of those emotions that stop us learning if we get stuck being lights off. And it's it's a metric that changes us from judgment when we think about children being disengaged or we look at their behavior. When we look at children's behavior, we kind of we step into judgment. And I've talked to head teachers about this and got them to see and feel a shift because we're judging the behavior, which is sort of downstream of how a child is feeling about learning, which maybe be disempowered, they've got their agency taken away, maybe they're sitting there bored, they can't follow what's going on, all normal, healthy reactions to having no agency in learning. When we switch to seeing that as being lights off, which is our thinking is negative, the way we feel, our nervous system is dysregulated, we can step into compassion. And when I've talked to children about how they feel and adults, because I work both with children, teenagers, and adults, and you ask them, and this might be something for everyone to who's watching to think about, like how does it feel when we are lights off? And parents talk about, well, it's like walking through treacle, but children tend to talk about feeling lost, lonely, scared, frightened, misunderstood, not seen, not heard, not valued. And I think from a point of view of really building a case of whether education is working, whether it's in school or out of school, the when we collect this data and children tell us that they feel lights off, then we have to do something about that. And sometimes that is not staying in the school environment that is causing that. However, this is where it gets exciting because when we begin to track our lights on status, as I call it, we can then begin to look and go, well, is this a normal, healthy disengagement? So are we hitting lights off, which is actually really important for learning? Or are we getting stuck in there, which is when the problem of mental health and mental ill health begins to kick in. And it's when we begin to see children, again, either in school or in home ed, kind of switch off from learning. And that's when obviously it gets difficult, whether we're a parent or an educator, to re-engage them. So this metric, lights on, lights off, even just as to collect data about, how a child is feeling when they're learning, has been really, really key in the parents that I work with, in the families that I work with, and also in the schools that I used to work with. So I sort of think Graham sort of said, well, how do we know, they're learning? And that was really where my metric came from, because I was wanting to go, well, how do we, without assessments, and all of that kind of thing, as parents also, how do we know they're learning? And for me, it was just like, well, you see it in their eyes. It's like their lights come on. So then when we look at being lights on, this is the sort of, we're tuning into now emotions of love, joy, gratitude, abundance. And we're really then stepping into that agency. So again, we can think about it as lights off, being disengaged and disempowered and disconnected actually from our learning circuitry. And lights on being we're empowered, we've got agency, we're leading ourselves. And we are fully connected with our learning circuitry, which I talk about being the heart set, the mindset, and skill set. And I think where this gets exciting is children know, so we can ask them directly. And what we want to be looking for is quite a normal, healthy curve between and fluid and dynamic movement between being lights off, which means we're stepping outside of our comfort zone, and then moving back in to being lights on. So I feel, and the parents and the families that I work with, it changes the conversation quite considerably when we start to look at it like this, because we're then not judging the behavior, but we can lead and make solutions and have policies and conversations that come with compassion. Do we want children, to be sitting there feeling lost and lonely and scared? Is that the most effective internal learning environment for them to learn? Of course it isn't. And it's really hard to argue against, like, well, they're just going to have to get on with it. So this is the conversation I love having with parents. I've got my book, Lights on Learning, which came out in December, which I was really excited to see was on Amazon's number one gift recommendations for homeschoolers. So, maybe we can put a link to that, and you can actually get a digital version from my website, so that it costs you less, and you can get it accessed straight away. But when I saw that, I just thought, actually, if we can empower parents to have that confidence that what they're doing is not only switching their lights on, which I know, Juliet, is really important to you, and and learn free, and but also that they are protecting and safeguarding their children's mental well-being. Because for me, this is the crux of any conversation. And the problem is when we sort of have conversations sometimes about mental health and mental well-being, we kind of get skewed to the extremes. Or I remember a teacher saying to me about my daughter when she went back into school, age 11 in secondary school. I said, look, she's really unhappy in the tutor group she's in. She's been home educated. And so I think it's really important that we set her up for success socially. And he said, well, is she crying when she comes home? I said, well, she's not crying when she comes home. And he was like, well, can we wait until she's crying when she comes home? And I'm like, no, we cannot wait. We're going to listen to the child who is more than able and capable of telling us that she is not thriving from a mental health perspective, which we then know means that she will not be thriving as a learner, regardless of whether she's hitting those top grades. So that's the conversation I'd love to have with anyone, again, right at policy level, or even just if it's within your home, because it's a game changer. And I think for parents, it's just as important for us to be asking, do I know what switches my lights on? How long am I spending with my lights off? Because it's normal and healthy to become lights off, but we don't want to get stuck there too long. And the best educational practices, in my view, the best educational policies, in my view, take this into account, and they build agency and ownership for the child so that they also know this frustration, this anger, or this what I'm feeling right now, which feels very uncomfortable. Actually, that's normal and healthy for the thinking that I'm having. So I see this enormous problem that we have, a learning crisis around the world, as it's been called by, the World Bank and UNICEF and reports. I see it as a real big opportunity for us to be able to kind of go, right, okay, when we shine the spotlight on what a child is thinking and feeling and how they are showing up and who they are able to be, we can look and have different conversations, and not one that is about blaming any party in the mix, but one that is about empowering that child to move dynamically and have the tools to self-regulate back to being healthy, engaged, connected, and lights on. So I hope that uh, is makes sense.
Well, I think it's so important what you're saying, Julia. because I think the using the term lights on and lights off is one that, it conjures something up for people, and I think if people don't understand, they almost need to ask themselves, well, what turns my lights off? And what turns my lights off? What makes me bored? What makes me lose interest and get frustrated, and that kind of thing. And then to understand, and I think most parents, if you think about it, you've seen when your children's lights are off. They
Yes, so
just,
clear.
yeah, yeah, we have seen it, but we've just, you don't think. And what turns the lights on is just, is what, when they become curious, when you see them
Yeah.
curious, you see those lights and the eyes light up, the sparkle come back, the smile, the engagement, concentration, all of these things that indicate, that the child is engaging. I'm just going to look and see if there's any comments on the live
And I
feed.
think I just want to add to that. I can't remember the name, but someone was talking about the love of reading earlier.
Yes,
And
Harriet,
and
yes.
yeah, and for me, that's what this is. My vision is a world where all children love learning. Because when we bring love into the mix, it has such, Dr. Barbara Friedrichsen's research was it's a positivity resonance and things open up for us. So I think this is really key. It's a great metric, it's a great metaphor, but it's also the science behind it backs up that if we know our children are uh, in a state of being lights off or lights on, then we know that readiness to learn and flourish, I guess, really it's about human flourishing at the end of the day, which is why I think many parents choose home education in the first place. It's certainly
Okay.
why I chose
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And um I was going to say, my brain is as if I don't say the thing right away, then I lose it. It's been a long day and we're doing really well. Um, I've had my son bring me some dinner, so I may be munching in between. Um, but I think, there's so much that as home educators, I always feel like we are at the cutting edge of understanding and learning
Mm.
for different, like we cover everything. We've got parents um, working with their dyslexic children, with children with neurodivergence, with autism, all of these different what some would view as challenges. But we find parents who've found how to work best with their children, and so we actually have the answers in many cases for educators. We have a lot to share. The
Yes.
combined knowledge, the combined expertise about learning, and the thing is also that I feel whenever I've filled in a consultation, one of these government consultations, I always talk about the training of local authorities and that they need to be trained. One of the things is child development,
Yes.
because part of this whole thing of whether if you're going to try and push a child before they're ready and they're not developmentally ready for something, you will lose them. You will put learning barriers up for them.
Yes,
Uh,
and I think that's the key, why the simplicity of understanding, well, if a child's lights are off, then they're not going to be able to learn. But we can use that to help them learn. And the results, the families I've worked with, the children I've worked with, it's incredible how fast we can re-engage children who have been disengaged for years. And I think that's where it gets exciting. So I think we tend to, as human beings, make things extremely complicated. But as an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur, and I guess for me, it's like, how can we make this simple? How can we really empower parents to be phenomenal leaders of their families so that they all flourish? And also have equipped with the conversations to have to advocate for themselves, which I think is what you're really doing, phenomenally well, Juliet and team.
to me, the secret is actually with the parents.
Yes.
If you work with the parents, support the parents, which is what's so annoying about this children's wellbeing and schools bill, is the bit about support is virtually, it's a joke actually. It's really not of any it's not worth even having that section on support in the bill, because it's like this long and it basically says it's up to the local authorities what support they offer. So that to me is that there are a lot of parents. There are some parents who struggle to parent because they weren't properly parented themselves. But if they could be supported to be the parents they want to be, that would be so much better. And, then that to me is the way to go. Support and helping parents to trust these good instincts that they have about their children, to have caring relationships because the relationship is so important as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's why I closed my centres, because I was working on a school site and working directly with the children. And I realized that actually, if I can work with the parents,
mm,
we make a change for life for that child rather than just, maybe inspire or re-engage them while we're working with them, but actually to create that culture of learning in the home. So
yeah.
that's definitely where I would love to see investment put, is just like what an opportunity this is when parents want to be involved in their child's education.
And
And
we should want that and we should be encouraging it and supporting it.
exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Julia. Thank you for coming back to join us this
Thank
evening. And
you.
please feel free to stay.